Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the top-tier brewing stand. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think. Jamil and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters.
Greetings, Cretans.
Somebody took my whiskey.
I did.
Someone's trying to figure out.
I can smell it all over here next to me. It's some strong whiskey that Yusef left us.
Yeah.
120 proof.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. It was nice.
I think Pushy Jack took it from you, being the producer that he is. He's worried.
Right. He's looking at me. He's like, are you falling asleep?
Take that man's whiskey.
Go on. Yeah, already having a great time here. We're down in sunny San Diego. Of course, overcast San Diego.
Yeah.
Right.
Perpetual marine layer San Diego.
Down for the Craft Brewers Conference, the CBC. And we're enjoying the hospitality of the wonderful new White Labs yeast facility.
Yeah.
And so not only their production facility, but they've got a lovely tasting room with, you taste the different kinds of yeasts, how they ferment out different kinds of different
do direct beer-to-beer comparisons,
yeah.
Same word.
And classroom that we're in, and just lots of cool stuff.
Yeah.
I think it should, I don't know if it is already. We have Neva Parker here. She could maybe correct us. It should be called White Labs World Headquarters, not yeast facility, not anything.
World Headquarters.
I mean, because it's such
Excuse me.
It's such a crazy facility with the beautiful tasting room and the offices upstairs that you guys have. Whitey's office itself,
the Love Den,
is like it's something out of Mad Men.
Yeah.
There's like a liquor cabinet in the corner, and I mean it's really it's world headquarters. We're not doing it justice every time.
It's a little crazy.
Yeah.
Well, really, the ultimate goal is to have a campus, White Labs campus.
Wow.
I see.
Right,
Nice.
like
Right.
this whole block.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Brewing Network is working on that. We're slowly inching toward the shed next door.
Yeah, there you go.
To actually be there. And as Jamil said, we're down here for the Craft Brewers Conference this week and doing some live broadcasting just today here at Brew Strong. And the CBC is a wonderful event. And speaking of CBC, we actually have the Coronado Brewing Company on the program with us this time, too. Sean's here with us today. Sean, you're the head brewer over there?
I was the head brewer.
You were? Okay.
Yeah.
So now you're the janitor?
Yeah, something like that.
Head brewer is the same as
Basically, now
janitor.
I'm the director of Brewery Operations, so I've got younger bucks doing the
Attaboy.
the tough work.
Good job.
Cool.
Yeah. After 10 years of brewing, your back goes out.
Yeah. Delegate.
Those who brew on this level understand when you're getting in the mash tun and the kettle and slapping kegs around, it gets a lot.
Yeah.
I was already worn out before it got to that point. So.
Jamil's Brewing Company.
Skip that.
Heretic's 1-year anniversary is this month.
Wow, congratulations.
And he brewed for 2 weeks before.
About 2 weeks, it's all like,
that's tough.
Nice.
climbing in the mash tun, all that stuff. And
Heck with this. Yeah.
like, I need to hire another person.
Yeah.
Right. So we are here from the White Labs facility, and we're going to talk about, we've been talking about yeast on the Brewing Network for years. Jamil was the first one to come on to the Brewing Network shows and say, you guys just aren't paying enough attention to fermentation, and really help homebrewers kind of figure that out. So one thing we're going to talk about today is learning about yeast and learning about how it really does affect your beer. Mm-hmm. And Neva Parker is someone who can really talk to us about that, obviously. How long have you been with White Labs, Neva?
Gosh, it's coming up on 10 years now.
Is it really?
Yeah.
How old is White Labs?
95. Since 95.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then is that right out of college for you, Neva? I'm not trying to date you. I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, just about.
Okay.
I thought you were going to ask me how old I was.
No, I'm just trying to figure out if you had another career, illustrious career before this.
No, I didn't.
But you went to school for chemistry, I imagine?
Biology.
And then have been in White Labs since?
Pretty much ever since.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about some of the differences in different types of yeast today, and Neva's going to be able to walk us through that. And one of the reasons we wanted to have Coronado on this particular program is, and I hope you don't mind me saying this.
Not at all.
You know, the progression of the Coronado beer in San Diego is really something to talk about.
Absolutely.
Coronado. How long has Coronado been around?
Since '96.
Since '96. So really quite a while.
Yeah.
And as the San Diego beer scene grew up, at one point, Coronado, you guys at Coronado thought, we need to do some growing up on the beer side too.
So basically, when we started, we were using Nottingham dry ale yeast, and for the most part, it was because it was easy to use.
Yeah.
And very clean, and that's all we knew. So basically, we'd pitch our yeast. We never repitched it, never captured it, stored it, nothing. It was a bag. You ripped it open, you jumped it in, and we were good to go.
I see.
So, but after 4 or 5 years of me brewing with Nottingham ale yeast and other fellow brewers in San Diego starting to step their game up and come out with some really unique, different type of beers, we started getting questioned, what about us? And thus, we realized that it was time to probably do some changes.
Okay.
And, but I have to admit, I didn't know much about liquid yeast, like none. So I asked my friend Tom Nickel at O'Brien's, and he gladly helped me.
Yeah, get in touch with White Labs.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, he came out to CBC, Coronado Brewing Company, and said, this is kind of how you do it. And so we asked a lot of questions. If you pitch from a IPA versus a blonde, are any flavors going to get transferred over? And there was some debate about that, but in his mind, he said, absolutely not.
Okay.
He did not feel that pitching from a IPA versus a blonde or a pale didn't matter. Flavor did not transfer. So I said, okay, sounds great. So we said, okay, let's get a pitch and see how this works. So we did, and we've never looked back.
Okay.
At Heretic, we actually pitch, it doesn't matter which beer is coming up, whether it's the cousin Imperial IPA or the twin, which is the West Coast Red, or the Porter. We go from one to the other to the other. We just whatever is the freshest yeast.
I see. Well, see, and now this is something that a lot of our listeners are homebrewers, Sean, and so this is something that homebrewers really think about because we'd like to be able to pitch on top of another yeast too, right. But we worry about that same thing that you worried about. Well, what about the flavor exchange? But we've also been. White Labs has done a wonderful job, and certainly in explaining it to us on the Brewing Network, of the importance of liquid yeast and what the difference is. But, there was really a time when I didn't know the difference,
right.
And I didn't know why. I easily could have been you, Sean, with my Nottingham yeast, pouring it in there, and just kind of thinking like, well, what's the difference? It's yeast, right?
Right, yeah, no, basically, I didn't have a lot of experience when I started. Okay. So the people who were training me thought this was in the best interest of myself and Coronado Brewing Company to make it easy on myself. I didn't have to think too much.
To just use the dry yeast, you mean?
Open it up, dump it in, off we roll.
They're like, don't let Sean think too much.
Right, exactly. I mean, we're going to have a problem there. So basically, what we realized is that the Nottingham dry ale yeast, it was a good yeast. I mean, it fermented out well. Our beers were fine. There was no contamination issues. However, we did have a very similar profile to all our beers, whether it was a blonde, a pale, a Hefeweizen, a golden. It was the same yeast.
I see.
So we heard that a lot. Your beers are nice, but that's what they are. They're nice. There's not a lot of differentiation. How do you say that?
Differentiation.
Yeah, differentiation.
Did you have the whiskey with Yusef too?
Well, you know what?
On
the way in, he gave us a little taste of the hooch, and I got to say, it was pretty tasty.
That's okay.
Plus, I've been sitting out there for 2 hours drinking 5-ounce beers, and I got to tell you, they go down smooth.
They do. Well, John Palmer doesn't let anybody on the show unless they've had a couple anyway. So
nice. Well, good. Well, I'm right there.
Rules.
And I hear that you guys have sometimes have a drunk contest where people call in and see who's the drunkest.
Different show.
Is that true? Okay.
It's on the Brewing Network,
Okay.
but they
That's
no
not you
longer
guys?
They no longer
I heard about
associate with that show.
I understand.
That's
These guys
my
are too
show.
serious.
Yeah, it's just a
These guys are
competition between
serious.
Jamil and I.
Okay, fair. I just heard it out in the lobby. So.
No, you are right. That's on the Sunday session that I do.
Awesome. Well, I'm
with
not
these
that
guys.
drunk yet, so.
Now you said you didn't have much experience getting into
Right.
this. What were you before?
I was a barista, so
Oh.
basically I was slinging coffee.
You brewed?
Yeah,
but-
that's true. Right, exactly right. It was just a different type of brewing. Graduated college in '93 with a degree in business, and when I came out in '93, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Knew I
Okay.
wanted to make money. I like that.
So you got into brewing?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. Got into brewing. So
Wrong way
yeah,
to go
so
about it,
not a lot of jobs hiring in '93 for what I was looking for, and I was just looking for anything in business. I like the idea of making money, so it wasn't happening. My brother worked at a cafe in Coronado. I grew up in Coronado. He said, "Hey, we're hiring. Why don't you work nights? You can interview during the day." And so I said, "Sounds great." Well, after 6 months of that, the owner, Rick Chapman, who now is a partner with myself in Coronado Brewing Company, said, "I like how you operate, and I've got an idea." And that was in late '94.
Okay.
And so the idea came about, and that's when I said, "What do I do? How do I fit into this?" They said, "We tab you as being the brewer." And that's when I got a little
They were like,
nervous.
"Man, you make a mean cappuccino,
Yeah.
and we just think you
Yeah.
can be the brewer."
Yeah, just like that. I mean, I was stunned. I was like, wow. I got scared because I said, brewing sounds complicated.
Yeah.
All I've ever done is drink the beer, not make the beer.
Okay.
And, so under the tutelage of John Atwater at La Jolla Brewing Company, he was one of the original guys in the brewing scene in San Diego back in the day, and learned under him for 9 months. And like I said, all I knew was, you add the malt and you push a couple buttons and this happens. And so I knew the how. I just didn't understand what we were doing exactly.
Okay.
And that was like that for the first few years of CBC. And I would say it reflected in the beers because I didn't have a lot of thought process. I just knew how to push buttons and this is what happens. And 15 years later, look at what we're doing now. I'm not also brewing anymore. We have people that are a little more knowledgeable about it. But 15 years, I kept the boat afloat enough to get us to that point.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And then clearly in the decision making to really start to focus on the beer, yeast was kind of your starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So basically, in the early days, I would come to Ron Chapman, who was the main owner with Rick Chapman, and say, maybe we should start looking at other ideas, other yeast types. And he basically said, well, if it's not broke, why are we fixing it? CBC was packed. We always had customers. The beer was fine. No one was complaining. But as the beer scene evolved in San Diego, beer folks started figuring out what was really quality, unique, different type of a beer, and ours didn't fall in that category.
Okay.
And so, but again, he didn't understand that just yet.
Sure.
So another year or two went by, and at that point, he started seeing and hearing people talk about it. And so at that point, we said, okay, he gave me the authority to say, okay, let's take a look at this and see how we can do this. Because he was worried it was going to change everything. And I said, but if it's going to change everything, it's going to change it for the better.
Sure.
So I can guarantee you that as long as we handle it properly. And to this day, it's probably been, 10 years at least since we've gone to White Labs. We haven't had any contamination issues. And basically we pull into buckets, and that's it. Some people use corny kegs, some people pitch cone to cone. Not us. As soon as that beer drops out to 42, 52, depending on what beer we're pulling it from, we get our buckets sanitized, we dump it in the buckets, and we haven't had any issues.
Homebrew style.
Just
pull it right out of there.
Homebrew style. Now, I understood that Tommy Arthur at Pizza Port Lost Abbey, that's the way he did it for years, and that's the way Tom Nichols sold it to me. He said, hey, Tommy does it this way. I said, well, geez, if Tommy's doing it this way, we're going to do it the same way. And we have never changed. Never done it in a corny keg, nothing. It's always been buckets, dump it in the man-way valve, and off we go.
Well, I have a lot of respect for two things, and I really mean this. One is that there's a lot of breweries that, I think there's enough beer drinkers out there that you can go along being a mediocre brewery and still sell enough beer to stay in business.
Right.
I don't recommend it, but it's possible. So I like that you noticed that, and as the San Diego beer scene grew up, you wanted to grow up too. And the other thing is, I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about it like this, because there are a lot of brewers who they know it, but they'd rather sweep it under the carpet and just pretend it's been fine. And this way, we all get to learn along with you.
Absolutely.
So that's what we'll do today. We got to take a break, but first, we want to thank Blickman Engineering for sponsoring our show.
Absolutely, yeah. Blickman Engineering, Blickman with two N's.
And a CH.
Blickman Engineering.com and a CH.
Well, you might think it was a CK.
And a B.
Yeah.
And a vowel, and a couple vowels.
A couple vowels in there, and .com at the end.
Right.
No, they've been longtime sponsors, and before we did the show, I knew a little bit about Blickman Engineering, and I didn't really get a chance to experience a lot of it. But once I did, once I got to know John Blickman and his understanding and his passion for making brewing better.
I told you.
I know. I became, I was quite impressed. And the more hands-on I got to be with the equipment, and the more I actually, looked into this stuff, the more I was like, this is really good stuff. This is really, a manufacturer that I can get behind, and a company, and customer service, and just an attitude that I think is worthy of being on the Brewing Network, being somebody that we talk about, because I wouldn't do this if I didn't really believe in it. And
plus, he's a geek like us.
He is, and he's a funny guy. He's a nice guy. He's a kind guy, and he really has a passion for what he's doing and the customers that he serves.
Yep.
I mean, that is an important thing to this guy. Doing right by his customers, not just making a buck, but it all seems to stem from that passion of doing the right thing for his customers. And I think they make money at it.
Yep.
But that's not the focus.
Yeah.
And I'm just really, really, truly impressed.
Check them out. Lots of good stuff to put in your brew system.
Yeah.
We might have to go take a look at your brewery stuff, Neva, and see if we can come up with some Blickman upgrades.
Yeah.
Yeah, might have to go see if we can get you like a Therminator or something.
Yeah.
What are you using to chill wort right now?
I think she could use a Tower of Power.
She might need the Tower of Power,
Oh, that
too.
sounds good.
Yeah.
It's quite enjoyable.
How do you chill wort right now? Do you use an immersion chiller?
It's an immersion, yeah.
Yeah, we might need to get you a Therminator. See if you can check that out.
Terminator's nice.
I like the sounds of it.
Yeah. It's just got a good name. It sounds badass.
All right, let's do this. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll do more with Coronado Brewing Company after this.
When you hear Blickman Engineering, think innovation, passion, quality, and customer service. Blickman gear is designed by brewers to give you a sense of pride in your equipment. At Blickman, they know what makes brewing a pain and build gear that makes it fun. Like the intuitive beer gun, a completely different approach to filling bottles. The Therminator Wort Chiller, a new take on a plate chiller that's sized for flow, performance, and the high groundwater temps homebrewers face every day. The Brewmometer, a brilliant weldless thermometer design with brewing parameters right on the dial. The Autosparge, ultimate simplicity for preventing an overflow or running your mash tun dry. And much more, like the modular top-tier brewing stand, conical fermenters, and their Boilermaker brew pots. With more cutting-edge equipment coming soon. Keep up with the latest from Blickman at blickmanengineering.com and stay on the cutting edge.
Hi, this is John from Grain and Grape. We've been supplying brewers in Australia for 21 years, and for all that time we've been working to offer the best service around, including free fortnightly all-grain brewing demos, 90 varieties of malted grain from Belgium, Germany, the US, Britain and Australia, equipment from Brewmasters, kegerators and crown urns to the humble brew-in-a-bag bag, heaps of hops, yeast liquid and Fermentus and Danstar dried yeast cultures, fresh wort kits made at Mountain Goat Brewery and on the 200-litre Brewmaster right here in the warehouse. We also sponsor and support brewing clubs and comps, the Australian National Homebrewing Conference, Aussie Homebrewer Forum and heaps more. Mostly though, 100 years of brewing experience means that we can give you the best advice on your next recipe, your new system, or that brewing problem that needs a solution. Mention the Brewing Network next time you order online or by phone for freight free on your next order. Check out grainandgrape.com.au for conditions.
Hi, I'm Jamil Zainasheff, and in addition to my work on the Brewing Network, I write the Style Profile column in every issue of Brew Your Own magazine.
Hi, I'm Sean Paxton, and when I'm not prepping for the Homebrewed Chef on the Brewing Network, you can find me writing articles on how to cook with your home brew for Brew Your Own magazine.
Greetings, cretins. This is John Palmer, and when I'm not writing for Brew Your Own, I'm reading it.
John Palmer, Sean Paxton, Jamil Zainasheff. If you love listening to them on the Brewing Network, you'll love reading their articles, tips, and recipes in the pages of Brew Your Own magazine. Join Jamil, John, and Sean 8 times a year in Brew Your Own. And when you subscribe to BYO on the Brewing Network website, half of your subscription price goes right back to the BN to support great beer and food programming. So sign up for Brew Your Own magazine through the BN website today so you can listen and read your way to better homebrew. When Michael Fairbrother started moonlighting, he had no idea how quickly his dream was going to grow. Having homebrewed for 15 years, Michael decided to go pro, but not with beer. While attending his homebrew club meetings, he saw ladies knocking their men out of the way to try his mead. Moonlight Meadery is now 2 years old and can produce 200,000 bottles a year. It's the first New Hampshire winery to ever distribute to California and Australia. In fact, you can find Moonlight Meadery meads in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island, Vermont, and New Hampshire, and they ship direct to 17 states. They produce 56 different varieties of mead and are unlike anything you've ever seen on the market. Michael Fairbrother at Moonlight Meadery is a real success story that can make the BN Army proud. Visit Moonlight Meadery in Londonderry, New Hampshire, or online at moonlightmeadery.com.
Back to the two guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're here at the lovely White Labs World Headquarters.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Lecture hall and tasting room.
Yeah.
Lecture hall, tasting room.
It gets longer every break.
And a fine
Campus.
bathroom facility as well.
Yeah.
If you need to
And
urinate,
baths.
Hotel and spa.
I highly recommend urinating at the White Labs facility. It's an absolutely incredible experience.
Right. Get a massage.
Yeah, while you're urinating.
That's
Yeah.
what Kara's
It's a
here
little
for.
uncomfortable when you came up behind me and did that. If your hands were a little higher, a little word of advice.
Listen, I'm
It's a little less
dedicated
spooky.
to my friends and sponsors, and I'm just trying to help the White Labs experience be all that it can be.
Oh, it is the White Labs experience.
Yeah.
The
yeah.
White Labs
See?
experience.
I know all of
3D
it.
glasses
In
at the
IMAX.
door. There's, it needs to be in 3D. That's all I can say.
Right. Well, we are here from during the Craft Brewers Conference this week, and Chris White was nice enough to invite us down. We've got Neva Parker on the program with us today, and Sean from Coronado Brewing Company has joined us. And just before the break, we were talking about Sean's learning curve and the process that we've all had to go through. We just don't all talk about it. And so what I'd like to hear from you guys, and the reason I'm involved in this show today is that so Jamil and John can also be panelists instead of hosts, because I think that you all have a really good amount of experience with using different kinds of yeasts. Mm-hmm. And the specific transition that Sean mentioned is going from a dried Nottingham yeast to liquid yeast. Mm-hmm. So what's the difference, Neva, when we're talking about a dry yeast and a liquid yeast? Why do I really care? It's all yeast, isn't it?
Well, it is yeast, yes. But, there are quite a few differences. I'm definitely not here to knock dry yeast. I know a lot of people use it.
Yeah.
It's had quite a bit of resurgence over the last couple of years, and the dry yeast manufacturers are doing a much better job with the quality. So, it's there. It's just that the extra processing to dehydrate the yeast can really put some strain on the yeast itself. So for me, that's the biggest difference. Think of it like a dehydrated piece of fruit. It's never going to be as good as the fresh fruit when you go to eat it. A dehydrated strawberry is always going to be a dehydrated strawberry. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
there really is no comparison in that sense. And I think, like I said, the quality is still there. It's still, I would have to say that with liquid yeast, for us in particular, we put our cultures through a very vigorous testing program. And with a dry yeast, it's pretty hard to always do that because it's open, the drying process isn't necessarily sterile. So there's possibility of introducing contamination into the cultures when you're drying it too. So there's a lot of different things, but of course, in a pinch, dry yeast works great. There's a lot of cells there. They usually take off very quickly because, you're adding a whole bunch of cells compared to what you would get in a liquid culture.
I see.
And the storage, of course, is much longer.
The shelf life. Okay.
Yep.
Because of the dehydration process.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about just in practice and in use? I mean, Sean said he tore open a bag and he threw it into the beer. And to me, as a home brewer, I can see that. But I do have a hard time envisioning a pro brewer doing that. Is that the right way to pitch even dry yeast?
Well, a lot of people do it that way because it's easy. But typically you want to rehydrate it first. That actual rehydration process is very important to help those cells, become supple again.
Okay.
So.
Supple is good. We all like supple, especially when Neva says it for some reason. Yeah.
But the suppleness, that allows them to transport the nutrients across the cell membranes. Correct?
Well, and control the osmotic gradient when everything comes rushing. If the membrane is not rehydrated properly, everything essentially just comes rushing in, and the yeast cell has no control over it. And you end up with like 50% dead yeast, at least.
Yeah. And you've used dry yeast too, haven't you, Jamil?
Yeah, I've compared dry and liquid. And, what people claim is the same strain, across various manufacturers and all that.
And what do you go back to? Are you a liquid yeast guy for the most part?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dry yeast, it's a cost thing for a lot of people, or it's an availability thing for a lot of people. So, we have listeners in India, and it's very difficult to get White Labs vials shipped to India intact and, at a reasonable cost. So they're, pretty much using dry yeast. There's reasons why you would, but if you have access to a product like White Labs or Y Yeast or one of the various manufacturers, that's what you should be using.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The cost difference, it's ridiculous. I think it's penny wise, pound foolish.
I see. If you're talking over the course of your entire batch of beer, we're really talking about a small amount here.
Right.
Yeah.
And in commercial brewing, you can reuse your yeast, much easier. You're brewing frequently. For a home brewer, I can understand, you're going to dump a $6 vial into, a batch of beer, and that's for one batch of beer, because you're probably not going to brew again for a few months. But even then, the availability of multiple strains, the purity, the effectiveness, and convenience of dry yeast versus convenience of liquid yeast, I would compare dumping in liquid yeast as easy as dumping in dry yeast.
Okay.
If you're not going to rehydrate your dry yeast because you're worried about contamination or something like that, and you're not going to make a starter because you're worried about contamination or something like that. Well,
they're both just as easy,
right? And you sanitize the outside of the container, dump it in, you're done. So I think that that's a non-issue as well.
Okay, John, did you have something to add?
Well, I was going to say, I started out, brewing in 91, 92, and I started out with Red Star. I mean, like the original offshoot of Fleischmann's, bread yeast.
Yeah.
It was
which doesn't make a great flavor.
Yeah, it made all right.
It makes
beer.
alcohol.
It made alcohol. Yeah.
But to me, when I went from Red Star to Nottingham, it was the night and day kind of transition. And I brewed with Nottingham for a long time. Made a lot of good beer with that, just like Sean. So, but then with the advent of White Labs and Y Yeast and in the greater variety of liquid strains,
right?
Now I think, Sean, you were alluding to this earlier, is that all your beers had a signature flavor that was primarily yeast driven.
Right.
And so when you're able to move away from that to different yeast strains and with a variety of liquid yeast, that's when you're really able to tailor a beer to its style.
Right.
And say, okay, now I think I've really made something that tastes like this European beer that I've heard about or tasted once. Now I really feel like I'm brewing that.
Exactly.
Well, one other thing that was brought up was the stability of dry yeast, and that's one of the reasons it can be shipped cheaply around the world and still be effective when it gets there. But one of the things I think a lot of people who use a lot of dry yeast miss out on is that yeast is also deteriorating over time. Especially if it's kept warm, it deteriorates much faster than if it's kept in a refrigerator, and so, the yeast is not nearly going to rehydrate to the same number of viable cells. When you have a 6-month-old or a year-old pack, just like the liquid yeast, it's deteriorating over time. So it's something to be also aware of. And I think people will also, they produce, this huge number of packs of yeast, and then it goes out to market, and then a lot of people keep them on the shelves. People aren't as aware of the production dates on yeast as in dry yeast as they are on liquid yeast.
Sure.
Liquid yeast, sure, it's not going to last as long, but they don't produce as much. They send it out to market much more frequently. So again, I'm not bashing dry yeast because I think you can make great beer with dry yeast. But I think a lot of the reasons that people decide to use dry yeast are false.
Okay.
And that they need to rethink why they're doing this and how this is helping their beer. I mean, the goal, I think, for anybody to listen to the show is to make the best beer you possibly can. Not the cheapest beer, but the best beer.
Yeah.
Now, in some cases, that may be dry yeast. But generally, especially people in the U.S., it's liquid yeast.
Okay. So with those being some of the physical and biological differences, I'd like to know about some of the differences in practice and in the beer. So I wonder, Sean, if you could point out maybe a couple characteristics of your beer that changed.
Sure.
What changed when you switched to this yeast?
What we found was when we went to liquid yeast from dry yeast is that we were getting a lot more flavors. Now, I have to specify the yeast we're using. We're using Cal 01, which I think is fairly standard for a lot of folks in our business in San Diego and maybe nationwide, is that it's a very neutral yeast. So you're getting a lot of flavor from the malt and the hops that you're using. So before we got that, we talked about the generic flavor that we were getting from the Nottingham Ale yeast.
Sure.
So I think that kind of masked the flavors that came from the malt and the hops. But when we used 01, all of a sudden we noticed, wow, our brown tastes different than our pale. Not that they tasted exactly the same.
Yeah.
But we did notice that they were more crisp, more distinct from each other.
Okay.
And so, for the most part, we use 01 for everything. Now, if we make a Belgian IPA, we're going to use 550. And, if we make a Saison, we'll use, I don't even know the number off the top of my head on that one because we don't make that one enough. But, we will change the yeast strains. But for the most part, we're 01 across the board. We'll repitch over and over, and I know that's,
So that can really be attributed to a lot of different things, that difference in flavor. Not even just the quality of dry yeast versus liquid yeast, but the yeast itself, right? You mentioned that the Cal Ale is kind of a more neutral. It allows the beer to come out. Nottingham, is that... Go ahead, Jamil. Is that more...
Well, I would attribute this to better fermentation.
Okay.
Better attenuation. If you're not fully attenuating out, some of those sugars, you're not getting to a proper pH. You're not, all these things. A brighter, fresher, more appealing beer comes from better fermentation.
I see.
One of the things that we're doing, I'd love to use different yeasts for all our beers. The problem is, our brew schedule is limiting us to one yeast currently. We got 3 beers. We got a double IPA, we got the West Coast Red, and we got the Porter. If people didn't know, people have asked, what yeast are you using in the Porter? I get this, fruity esters, and I'm getting, this complex, fermentation character. It's 001. The reason you're getting that is actually, by having good fermentation, the malt character all of a sudden pops. The extra money you're spending on that fancy malt all of a sudden comes out. On the hoppy beers, boy, the hops really, can now rise to the top. They're not muddled over by unfermented wort or, other fermentation compounds that can really kind of mask some of those bright characters that are really very subtle and get lost in a poor fermentation. So I think that in and of itself, 001 is a fairly neutral yeast. It's not adding stuff, but by fermenting properly, it's getting out of the way, and it's letting the other compounds and other things that you're doing really shine, and the beers can seem unique and different across the board just because of that fact.
I see.
Well, and I think also, different conditions are going to affect the way that
Sure.
strain ferments. So,
Yep.
I really, truly do believe that a live yeast has more of that component than a dry yeast does, one that's been dehydrated, because it is interacting with some of those other conditions that you're putting these through. So, like, your porter, for instance, could be just different fermentation profile, or some other different things that could be affecting some of the flavor characteristics that are being thrown there. Gravity could play a part, but granted, 01 is as a neutral strain, it can still change based on temperatures, gravities, whatever it's kind of put into, and it may not be as drastic as a different strain that typically produces more of those ester compounds and things like that, but it is there, and we've done studies on that, and it's been measured, so we know those things are.
Well,
are
in our case, the three beers are actually, they all start at the same gravity. Mm-hmm. And the difference is really where they attenuate out to. Mm-hmm. And we control that by, mash temperature or actually, non-fermentable specialty malts, things like that. So it's just, the starting gravity is the same, so that's not really an issue. And then, the water's all the same, and a lot of these other things are the same. Fermentation temperature is actually the same on all of them.
Right.
Oxygen's the same, nutrients are the same. So it really, I think it gives you a real pop of those other compounds, and the thing that I think is the same across that I rely on to make that difference is fermentation, really getting good fermentation all the way through. And we were repitching some yeast from another brewery earlier on, and we had some issues, and I think we were not quite getting those flavors, and it wasn't until we really had more control over it that we really got that distinction between them.
Okay.
So and I think certain compounds, certain malt compounds, highly kiln malts, I think can affect the way a yeast ferments. And obviously, I think that makes a difference in the final, ester profile and things like that. But I think that big difference is, if you're sprinkling in dry yeast, you're I'm not sure, how good a ferment you're getting.
Okay.
Just overall.
So even the switch for Sean, it wasn't just the product, but changing the pitch rate, the amount of healthy yeast that went into the beer, and even just adjusting his fermentation profile. You probably didn't even know it at the time.
Exactly.
But you adjusted your fermentation profile.
Fermentation got better.
With the switch. Did any of your other equipment change at that time? So the fermenters were the same, and the way your beer was temperature controlled?
Everything was the same.
Okay.
Other than opening up a package, I was dumping a bucket in.
Right.
Yeah. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, but then we got back to the cost, and that's when we realized, wait, we're going to be saving a lot of money because, we'll take out Cal 01 to 20 plus. I know
Neva doesn't like
that, but boy, I tell you, if you handle it right, I tell you, that yeast gets happy in its environment and gets used to the size of your fermenters and all that good stuff. And this stuff flocks out quick and nice.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and it drops out real nice too.
That's very true. We make recommendations on those generations and how long you should go, but that's just
what?
That's
what
just
is
a
that?
rule of thumb.
What's a rule of thumb?
For ales, 8 to 10. But that's not always
doubled
true.
down,
That's not always
Sean.
true.
Theoretically, there is no limit.
No, and I agree.
It's all based on
it all depends on your
cleanliness
handling,
and how
yeast
you're
handling is
selecting
everything.
and all that.
No,
yeah.
absolutely.
Right.
And that, for us making those recommendations, people want to know what that answer is, and there's no definite answer. We make that as a recommendation, but absolutely there are cases that people have gone 100 generations, never have any problems. There's no variations, there's no mutations, and it all comes down to handling.
Right.
How well you handle that yeast, what kinds of conditions they're being pulled from and being reused. So,
well, and the yeast are very, mutation resistant in a way, and so I think it's more. The pressures, when you're putting excessive pressures as far as selection, or, and I think for the majority of breweries, it's a contamination thing before it's anything else.
Right. Yeah.
And, if you're selecting, the most flocculent or least flocculent yeast, over and over again, then, it only takes a couple of batches before. You wouldn't make 8 batches. You'd see really dusty yeast, or the thing wouldn't attenuate hardly anymore, and you'd see that almost immediately. And I've experienced that as a home brewer. I was like, oh, okay, I'll select this really dusty yeast from secondary, and pretty soon you get something that looks like milk. So, I think it's a contamination thing. And then, a lot of breweries, they go until they taste something wrong, and that's too late.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we randomly bust out the microscope and have the boys look at it. Not me, but the guys.
Someone does.
Exactly. Someone in our brew house does bust it out and does some counts, and it seems like it works.
Yeah.
I got to say, it seems like it doesn't seem to generation 4 or 5 before it really just gets happy.
Yep.
It's really happy and comfortable. And then we keep that bad boy going. And I can say right now, I just left the brewery a few hours ago, and we're on 15, and everything's kicking.
Yeah.
Well, I think there are a lot of ways to tell that there's something wrong with the yeast before you get to a flavor issue.
Right.
So even if it's, just getting stressed or it's mutating, you should know that. And that's why it's so important for any brewer, professional or home brewer, if you're collecting yeast, to really know and understand that strain and know that fermentation and, what you're typically used to seeing. Because if anything seems slightly off, then, if you collect this and reuse it, you're probably going to have a problem. So flocculation is a huge thing. When the flocculation starts to change, it's probably time to switch.
That's usually when we take a look at it, because, you start filling up those buckets, and you notice it seems a little light. And you're like, weight's not there, and the taste is not bad, but it's not that fresh, yeasty flavor. So that's when we go, okay, time to look at it.
Hold that thought. Let's take a break and come back and talk about some of the things because I think this is really part of the learning process. And what I liked about this topic is not only learning about different kinds of yeast, but how to use them and how they react. And it seems to me that if Neva can point out some of the things that start to go awry when your yeast is going the wrong direction, and I bet Jamil has some experience with it too, and Sean, then we can talk about that. Is that cool?
Sounds great.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll do some more of that stuff.
7 short minutes off California State Route 101, there lies a secret oasis for all craft beer lovers.
It's Relax, Grillin' and Chillin', bro!
Relax, Grillin' and Chillin' in Hollister, California is a craft beer lover's dream come true.
Not like a creepy JP dream. Like a normal craft beer lover's dream.
30 taps pouring your favorite craft beer. Visit Relax, Grillin' and Chillin' on Facebook to see the most up-to-date beers and what's on the grill.
Let us grill so you can chill.
Angus burgers, filet mignon and ribeye steaks, dogs and sandwiches, and more. Great food, great beer in a place where you can kick back and relax. Tuesdays are brewery nights. Come in to celebrate, and you're not limited to enjoying your favorite brew at the restaurant. Relax, Grillin' and Chillin' has beer to go. Relax, Grillin' and Chillin'. Let them grill so you can chill.
What'd you get? More brewing ingredients?
Yep. You know what I love about Brewmaster's Warehouse?
The $6.99 shipping?
Well, yeah, but...
the in-store classes for beginning brewers.
Yeah, that's cool, but...
The Brew Builder. Creating and saving your recipes online is awesome!
No, I mean, yes, but...
The cheese-making supplies.
No.
The wine-making supplies. The distilling equipment and liquor flavorings.
All that stuff is awesome, yes, but what I really love is that the guy who runs it is totally hot. And that Brew Builder software is awesome.
Oh, yeah. Brewmaster's Warehouse brings you flat rate shipping on great equipment and ingredients to make beer, wine, cheese, and spirits at brewmasterswarehouse.com. And if you're in Georgia, stop by Brewmaster's Warehouse Monday through Saturday from 10 to 6. Visit brewmasterswarehouse.com today because it's totally hot.
Oh, yeah.
A vial of White Labs yeast is the key to your best beer. When you open a vial of White Labs yeast, you're giving your beer its best chance for a perfect fermentation. In addition to their already incredible variety of yeasts, White Labs is proud to announce WLP 90, San Diego's super yeast, now available year-round. WLP 90 is super clean, super fast fermenting, with low esters and has a neutral flavor and aroma profile. It's alcohol tolerant and highly flocculent. For more of the latest White Labs news, click over to whitelabs.com, where you can read reviews of yeast, learn in the lab section, and join the customer club. And if you should find yourself in San Diego, White Labs has a brand new training facility for craft brewers and home brewers alike. Whitelabs.com. Discover yeast, nutrients, enzymes, and more for commercial breweries, home brewers, and homebrew stores. White Labs. It's all in the vial. Are you a member of the American Homebrewers Association? Well, you should be. Members of the AHA can focus on brewing beer, and the AHA takes care of the rest. The American Homebrewers Association advocates on behalf of homebrewers like you to legalize the hobby in all 50 states and make sure that beer laws make sense. Plus, there are many great benefits that come with your AHA membership, like pub discounts that give you awesome deals at bars, restaurants, breweries, and more. Zymergy Magazine and eZymergy for tons of articles, how-tos, easy-to-follow recipes, and news about the hobby you love. And access to the members-only content on homebrewersassociation.org. But the AHA can't do it without your support. Join today so the American Homebrewers Association can keep fighting for your home brewing rights. Visit homebrewersassociation.org or join right now from the homepage of the Brewing Network website. Relax. Don't worry. It's the American Homebrewers Association. By popular vote from the Northwest Brewing News, HopTech has been voted the best homebrew shop in Northern California. Serving homebrewers for nearly 30 years in Dublin, California, HopTech carries more than 40 different kinds of hops and more than 60 different grains. Malt extract, spices and sugars, hop oils and extracts. Open every day except Wednesday or shop online anytime at hoptech.com or call 1-800-DRY-HOPS, 1-800-379-4677. With in-store classes almost every Saturday, huge selection, and a dedicated commitment to their customers, HopTech is one of the longest running and passionate homebrew stores, period. And now, by popular vote, the best homebrew shop in Northern California. And don't forget their 15% military discount. HopTech. Visit today at hoptech.com.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew Strong.
All right, we're back at the lovely Giant World headquarters.
And
tasting
spa.
room, spa,
White Labs
hotel,
worldwide.
Massage bathroom.
Massage bathroom.
We've got
facility.
bidets in there, you know.
You do?
And bistro.
Have you tried them?
No, I gotta go try that out.
They're amazing.
Yeah,
I wash my rear.
The faucet wasn't working right.
What happened? I don't know, but it wasn't right. Don't ask.
Something liquid sprayed me. I turned around. Palmer said it wasn't him, so it must have been the bidet.
Right. All right, we are here at the live at the White Labs World headquarters, which is a great location. You should come down. They have a tasting room now, so it's a public location. You can come down and check out the experiments that they're doing. And Neva Parker, who's with us on today's program, is heavily involved in that process. We're also here with Sean from the Coronado Brewing Company. Now, just before we went to break, we started to talk about maybe carrying over your yeast for too many generations. And, there are some hardcore homebrewers out there who like to carry over their yeast for several generations too. Neva, I'm sure you hear from some of them in customer service sometimes. But what you had said that piqued my interest was that there are some signs that in your beer that you've maybe gone a little bit too far. And I thought we'd start with Neva and then maybe talk to the brewers and see what they've noticed too. How do I know when my yeast needs to be replaced?
Well, usually you're going to look for any kind of variance from your normal fermentation. If you've been using the yeast for 10 generations, and it's starting to act differently this time. It's a little bit slower than usual. It's starting to have issues with flocculation, where it's just kind of staying in suspension, or it's flocculating too early. Those are some signs that you can tell it's probably time to change the yeast. And, a lot of kind of what we talked about earlier is that, if you treat the yeast right, it can go forever, many, many generations. And what's really going to cause stress to the yeast is pressure. Any kind of, poor handling or, maybe too high gravity, something like that just really puts a lot of stress on the yeast can cause it to undergo mutations over time. So that's where these signs kind of come about, when they just start to get a little bit stressed.
Okay. And Sean, you said you were shy about saying it because you didn't want Neva to punch you in the face, but 20 generations sometimes. Now, what starts to happen at, say, 18, 19 generations that you guys noticed?
What we noticed was that the fermentation times were a little slower, and it seemed like it just got stuck at this. It got stuck, like it just kept going, but it wasn't getting lower. But it was still bubbling. And so that's always our indicator, other than the fact that we do take gravity samples. But for the most part, it's a quick look in the bucket and go, oh, yeah, the bubbles are slowing down. I think it's coming to the end. Oh, how many days is it? I mean, we look at our sheets, and we know. And so usually for us, it's 4 to 5 days on everything.
That's what it should be.
Well, that's what's normal for us.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if that's normal in normal
It really depends,
terms.
but that's why it's so important to know your own fermentations.
Right.
If you're brewing, I know it's difficult with homebrewers who are brewing different kinds of beers all the time, being able to know that, but there are these kinds of signs. Even without knowing how many days it's been, but if it's slowing down and doesn't seem to be reaching terminal gravity.
Right.
I mean, those are things.
That's what we look for. And then also when we're actually pulling the yeast, when we're filling up our buckets, and you just...
Pulling it for the next batch? Or,
right. Well,
okay.
just pulling yeast from, say, this tank so that we can repitch it into these next 4 tanks. Usually we're pulling from our 20-barrel tank. We'll get 4 to 5 pitches from each 20-barrel tank. And then that goes into 4 or 5 tanks.
Okay.
And then we pull from all those, assuming that it's a non-high gravity beer. So our Idiot IPA, we do not pull yeast from.
That sounds like a great beer, by the way.
It's pretty awesome. It's a
great
double
beer.
IPA.
Made for me. Go on. Yeah.
So basically, IPA and down is the only beers, alcohol-wise, that we pull yeast from. So
okay. Now, how about you, Jamil?
So it relates to behavior, but one thing about that, pulling from IPA, one interesting thing Mitch Steele at Stone had said was they had tried always pulling from levitation, so they have a lighter, lower gravity beer to pull their yeast from. They're getting lower viabilities from that than they were from their IPA. So they go with, or they were going with Ruination or something. No, it's IPA. And so that's what they repitch everything off of is the IPA, because even though the massive IBUs and the higher alcohol and things like that, it's fresher, it's more consistent, and they were getting much higher viability levels going with that. So, and that got me. Otherwise, I was always about the pitch from lower to higher, and if you make a high gravity beer,
don't pitch or something.
And I had some experience with that at homebrewing, but that kind of got me into the mindset of, it's the freshest yeast you have. It's the the yeast that's fermenting properly. That's the one you pitch from. And as far as finding out when something's not working out right, you have to be a bit of a yeast whisperer. You have to be. It's subtle signs that tell you when the pitch isn't. Something's going on with the yeast. You have to be. It's like you're going out with your girlfriend and she's saying, and you have to
I don't
read
want
from that.
Mexican food again.
Right, or whatever it might be.
You have to listen.
You have to listen. You have to look at those signs. And one of the things we do is characterize. Every time we take a gravity reading of fermentation, we monitor fermentation parameters. As we go through, it goes through fermentation. And we also try and characterize, the quality of the bubbling.
Right.
The rapidity, there's a series of terms that are used in order to characterize that, and so that can be compared to other fermentations of the same wort. And then you can also measure things. You can measure your pH. You can measure the gravity at the different points. You can measure various things about fermentation that can tell you if you're missing these subtle signs. What is that? And also, the final test is, you taste a beer, and before you can pick out something very specific and say, oh, I taste, diacetyl, or I taste, or this, that, or the other thing, the beer doesn't taste the same. If you're brewing the same beer over and over and over again, you just know, you taste it and you go, no, it's not right. Something's happening. What happened on this batch? It's not, even your measurements are all the same, but your sense of smell and taste are so sensitive that you can say, no, this isn't the same beer. There's something subtle going on here. And out in trade, it's people aren't going to notice. They won't notice that, but you as the brewer should be able to pick that out. And again, if something like that comes up, you've gone a little too far.
Okay. So. All right. John Palmer, anything from the homebrew side? Now, you said you've come a long way from Red Star all the way till now, and I assume that you're a White Labs. You're a Southern California boy. You should be White Labs.
Well, I use both. I use White Labs and White Yeast.
Okay.
But my brewing is so many different styles and variety that I don't think I've ever pitched yeast more than 3 times from a single thing. So I just don't have the experience on looking for it to go bad. Usually, it's become a matter of it is sat in the fridge, under
too long.
Yeah, too long, and it's starting to turn color, and that where I say, well, this yeast isn't ready to go.
Okay.
And even then, when I'm repitching, it's almost always going into a starter to revitalize it before I can put it to the beer, because I'm just not brewing often enough.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So a little different situation for me than for you all, where you're brewing, weekly or daily, or whatever the case may be.
I think you make a good point, though, in that even though you may not be reusing the yeast a lot of times, you're still looking at it and noticing if it's changing in color. And, all of the sensory attributes of looking at the yeast are really important, too. And, I still get pictures from a lot of homebrewers who email me and send me photos of their yeast and ask me if it looks okay.
looks like Vegemite.
Classic.
Right.
I mean, while that's, while you're laughing about that, at least it goes to show that they're looking at it. And I think
that's
that
true.
those things are important. So I'm happy to look at it. I have a lot of experience looking at yeast. So,
right.
you need an expert opinion. All right.
Look at it.
I will look at it. I'll look at your yeast.
I got this rash.
Can you look at this for me?
I'm going to get like 500 emails now with yeast pictures.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Can you look at this for me? It's I don't know. It just feels a little strange.
That's great. Yeah, it's C white.
Right.
There you go.
Right.
But if I send you just a picture of my airlock, can you tell anything from that? Yeah.
No, but I mean, that happens a lot. And I am happy to look at it, because I know, if you're not doing it a lot, it is hard to tell. And I've had a trained eye for the last 10 years at looking at this stuff. So,
well, and if you're not doing it a lot, I can suggest something that will help. AdamandEve.com. I'll tell you, gals. If you're not doing it a lot, if you need somebody to look at it, you might try going to AdamandEve.com. They got a great array of fantastic things to excite your activities in the bedroom.
Yep.
Boy.
You go to AdamandEve.com. If you buy one item, you get it 50% off.
Right.
They're going to throw in 3 free adult DVDs, and these aren't just crap from the scrap bin.
No, these are your favorite Brewing Network professionals.
They're Neva quality. You choose them.
Right.
Yeah.
This is stuff she would look at. You can get the 3 free adult DVDs. You're going to get a free extra gift. So sensual. I really can't tell you about it. I'd turn red if I was to talk about it. And then you're going to get free shipping on top of that. So what you do is you go to the Adam and Eve, you go to BrewingNetwork.com, you listen to us, and then you go to AdamandEve.com.
Yeah.
You, at checkout, use the code word Jamil, Jamil.
Right.
And you're going to get the free 50% off of the one item you buy. You're going to get 3 free adult DVDs. You're going to get the free extra gift and free shipping on top of the whole thing.
Coupon code Jamil.
Yes.
Coupon code Jamil. Jamil.
And it helps the Brewing Network help you, believe it or not. As fun as it is to do those ads, it really does help the Brewing Network help you. And we're helping you, if you think about it. And if you're not doing it enough.
If you're not doing it enough, AdamandEve.com.
Perfect.
We should talk
or, email Neva.
Whichever, yeah.
We should talk to John Blickman about doing free DVDs.
3 free Blickman DVDs.
An extra geeky gift. So geeky we can't mention on the air.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good idea. So beer geeky we can't even talk about it. I love it. Okay, well, we are just about out of time. Sean, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's awesome.
Good
way to start the CBC.
Yeah, I think so, too. I'm happy to be here starting it with you guys. If you're down in San Diego for the Craft Brewers Conference, you can go to Coronado Brewing Company all week long and taste the beers that we're talking about. And I think you'll find it to be a fantastic use of liquid yeast. So if you're curious about the difference, then you can check it out. I know it's a destination for a lot of people coming to town.
Absolutely.
White Labs must have a ton of events going on this week. You can come to the tasting room right here all week long, as White like to say. They're open 24 hours, I think you said, right, Jamil?
Oh, yeah, 24.
24/7.
Yeah.
Chris's office is open.
Right. It's open 24/7. But you guys also will be on the floor at the Craft Brewers Conference?
We'll be on the floor at the conference Thursday and Friday.
Okay. Mm-hmm. In the Brew Expo America?
Yes.
Okay. And then there are, Jamil and Heretic. They're going to be running around the conference the whole time. You can find Jamil and John Palmer both at the opening ceremony tonight at the San Diego Zoo. And then they're here all week. You're going to try to go to seminars and things like that?
Oh, yeah.
You too?
Yeah.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
It's a valuable part for me.
Right.
Come to my seminar.
Okay.
What are you doing, Neva?
She winked at me. Did you see that?
Troubleshooting fermentation.
Yeah.
Oh,
Saturday.
Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. And John Palmer is working at the 5-Star booth, right?
Right. Yeah, I'll be there and talking about 5-Star and all the different products they offer.
You're their consultant now. A consultant for them?
A consultant, yes.
I like that.
Yeah.
Palmer's a brainiac. He needs to put that brain to use now that he's just hanging out with the kids. You got to get out there and do some chemistry work with those 5-Star guys.
I'll see what I can do.
All right. It's good. You see his logo, Jamil?
Yes, I did.
It's his self-portrait?
It's actually Yusuf from Ballast Point.
Nice.
Yeah. That's a very strong consultant on your chest there. Palmer. It's fancy stuff. All right, you can check all this out on the Brewing Network. We'll put this stuff up in the podcast so that you can find it. Come check out Coronado Brewing Company. And, some good Brew Strongs, you guys.
Yeah, I think these are, if nothing else, fun.
Yeah.
We really should come back down and do some more beer tastings and use comparisons and so on.
So we should drink more beer.
Mm-hmm.
We should hang out in San Diego, especially at the White Labs world headquarters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Get
Bistro
a massage in the bathroom.
Yeah. Bistro. It's going to be really long by Friday.
The White Labs Palace and Hotel and
Casino.
Spa Casino.
Sounds like Stone Brewing Company.
It does, except a little more Chris White. If you start adding the
there you
casino
go.
and
Nice.
the cigar room, it's
Nice.
just a little more
Golf
hardcore.
course.
The golf
Yeah.
course.
Yep.
That's
Love
true.
it.
That's right.
All right,
Country Club.
take us out, Jamil.
All right. So another fine show. We had a lot of great guests.
We did.
And I think, one of the things about this kind of programming is it's free.
Yes.
And if you like it to be free, I suggest going and checking out many of our fine sponsors. Yeah, White Labs is one. They've been a sponsor for a long time of the Brewery Network. Our dear friend, Mr. John Blickman of Blickman Engineering. It's with the two N's, an H, E, and a B, .com.
And a free spin.
No, they're truly great sponsors. So check them out. Make sure you tell them that you appreciate that they pay for the show, so you don't have to. And if you feeling a little flush and have a few extra bucks to burn, I'd suggest going to the Brewing Network store. There's a lot of good stuff there. Go to thebrewingnetwork.com/store, and you can get great shirts, hats, glassware, books, all sorts of goodies in there.
Type in the code word ramen.
Ramen, and that way Justin gets an extra.
He gets an extra chuckle out of it.
Right.
So lots of good stuff there, and that again goes to help keeping programming like this on the air. So until then, brew strong.